All right. Thank you again for joining today. My name is Cassandra Bull. I'm a policy specialist at the National Farm to School Network, and we are all in this room to talk about the growing landscape of statewide local food solicitations. So this is the third installation of our State Spotlight series, and our goals are to increase awareness of innovative programs, to increase local procurement. We really want to tease out all of the multiple levers that state level actors can use to advance K through 12 local procurement. We want to focus on emerging and unique strategies. So this definitely falls in unique and, except for Walter's case, which we'll hear later, emerging. We're also focusing on strategies that are not legislation heavy, and they often tie into existing programs and systems. And for the most part, you'll hear vast differences on this today. There are no or low cost strategies. And then our third goal is to share high level insight on replication and implementation of whatever we're talking about. We have a big panel from all across the nation today. From North Carolina, we have Walter Beal from the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. From Maryland, we have Kanika Campbell from the Department of Education. From Massachusetts, we have Simca Horowitz from Massachusetts Farm to School. And then moving to the West Coast, from Utah, we have Danny Perez from Utah State Board of Education. And last but not least is Leanne Echo from Washington, Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. And additional shout out to the National Procurement Community of Practice Facilitation Team. This webinar today is part of a larger project, which is that Community of Practice. And so folks that help make that happen are Cheryl Belinsky, Lizzie Cooper, and S.J. Peterson from Cornell Cooperative Extension Harvest, New York, and May Supros from the Michigan State University Center for Regional Food Systems. So for our agenda today, I'm going to give an intro and benefits of what we're talking about. We'll do a landscape overview where the panelists will give like 2 to 3 minute introductions of their programs. They're all different. We'll have a facilitated panel Q&A, and then we'll open it up for around 15 minutes to your questions. And we did this last time, and it seems to work out pretty well. We have a Canva whiteboard, so we'll be dropping that link in the chat. And so here the instructions are on the left. We invite you to, if you have general questions or questions for specific folks from different states, please type your question in and move it to the area that fits best with that category. Okay, so about statewide farm to school solicitations. Just to level set, in procurement, a solicitation is the formal process of inviting suppliers to submit bids, proposals, or quotes to provide goods or services. It ensures fair competition, transparency, and helps organizations select the best vendor for their needs. And so what we're talking about, how does this really work with statewide local food solicitations? Typically an organization, we have a lot of state agencies here, but also nonprofits and or groups of schools with the proper authority can issue an open solicitation to local producers. This can be farms or aggregators or both, to respond to regarding their pricing, availability, etc. Really, the key here is that once those awards are finalized, multiple child nutrition programs across different areas can make purchases without additional procurement requirements. So the work of procurement is done. I will note that a lot of the programs you'll hear about today, the Local Food for Schools USDA federal program, most schools could use that pocket of funding to make purchases made under these solicitations, but now schools are using their own funds from their own budgets on all of these states. And then I also just want to note that aggregated solicitations or cooperative purchasing does happen a lot, whether it's at the state level or regional, like groups of schools across the states. So some states, this is a very familiar practice. In other states, it's less frequent. It really just depends on your local context. But really, these 5 states that we're highlighting are some of the only ones that have specific solicitations for local food. And so the benefits, my favorite, is reduced administrative burden for school food operators. One bid replaces many, so rather than many schools trying to get this work done, they have one one bid. There's less paperwork there, and it saves staff time from doing all of that work and finding local vendors and going through all of this process. Also, for producers, it really scales up market demand and access. So, a lot of schools combined can increase demand and really give producers that work at scale a market to tap into school food. And then also, you'll hear today that solicitations are generally flexible. They can change year to year. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach this issue, and you can also leverage public-private partnerships that we'll hear about later. And my last slide here is that statewide solicitations are a solution to farm to school. They're one of those levers. They're not a perfect solution, right? So as we talk about scaling up and large scale, we can leave smaller and under-resourced producers behind. There are ways that these states are sort of ways to ameliorate this issue, like providing multiple awards or building in values-aligned preferences within their solicitations. These are solutions that can help include a lot of producers that want to sell into the school food marketplace. Okay, that's the intro. So now we're going to shift over to the growing landscape of statewide local food solicitations. And up first, we have the oldest solicitation I can find. So, Walter, do you want to talk about your program for a few minutes?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Here in North Carolina, we have a very special program that's been going on since 1997. We started with one product, which was strawberries, and that's grown to over 25 different items actually for this year. We do two solicitations a year. The first bid or solicitation is for the products for the first half of the school year. And of course, the second bid is for the second half. That way, we have it early enough that schools can plan and see pricing because I know they work really, really hard to stay within their budgets. Schools place orders and we distribute to them every other week. So we actually deliver them 22 weeks out of the year. We have our, we pick up from the farms. We solicit all of our products from local farmers. Some of our items are minimally processed, like diced sweet potatoes or sliced cucumbers, zucchini, squash, stuff like that. So we try to put it in a form that schools can best use it. And we deliver it. We do multiple USDA programs, and all of our products are farm to school products are delivered with our own fleet of trucks, which I think we'll speak to a little bit later on. Next slide. We have a product catalog. Like I said, I think this year we're going to have over 25 products. We'll have to wait and see what the second half of the year holds. And the LFS funding was a huge something for North Carolina. The peak of LFS grant, we did $3.6 million through our farm to school program. Over $4 million was spent that year on local produce of LFS funds. About half of that money came through us, through our farm to school program, and the other half went directly to local farmers, vendors, suppliers, because we strongly encourage them developing relationships with local people in their area. We own our own fleet of trucks. As I kind of said before, we deliver at no cost to the schools. That's just a service we provide. And going back to solicitation, there are 2 awards a year. And so we can help schools plan ahead because I know they can't, it helps them when they know weeks and months in advance what we have available for them. And North Carolina is one of the few states in the country that requires GAP certification to assure that our schools are getting safe, fresh, good product to serve to our kids.
Excellent. Thank you, Walter. Yeah, so not only is North Carolina the oldest solicitation that we found, it's also probably the most involved in terms of the trucks and all of the ordering systems and the delivery. North Carolina does a lot of the service specifically for schools. So thanks for sharing about your program. Next up, sort of in the same vein, I feel like we're going on a continuum of administrative effort that states put into these solicitations. we're moving on to Washington, and Leanne will share about your program.
Thanks, Cassandra. I agree. I feel like I want to be Walter when I grow up. So, or our program wants to be Walters when we grow up. As Cassandra showed, Washington does really kind of follow that same pattern as North Carolina, where we've really leveraged our existing USDA food distribution program. So in Washington, our food distribution program, besides pushing out those USDA direct items, we also do processed items. So we had an existing system where we go out to bid to process USDA foods into end products. And so we really mirrored that. So we issue our solicitations and make our awards. So that is kind of happening all in the same cycle as those processed foods. So we just kind of intersected ourselves there. Those Washington and local products make their way into our food distribution program. So our sponsors are placing their orders for those local foods right alongside their USDA orders in the same platform. Our vendors deliver to our state contracted warehouses. And then the schools get those products right alongside the same delivery as they're getting their USDA foods products. Next slide. So how we all started was we had a USDA Farm to grant, a Patrick Leahy grant, where we wanted to explore the concept. So we were like, this is a great idea. Let's try to build this out. And then the pandemic happened, and then local foods for schools. And so we supercharged the program. As we were trying to figure it out, we started doing it, which I don't highly recommend. That's a little stressful. I recommend you kind of figure it out a little bit more before you start doing it. But it was all good. And kudos to our team that made that happen. So we do limit it to frozen and dry because those are the two types of warehouses that we have. We do not have our own trucks. We have a contracted warehouse and shipping contractor who has 4 warehouse sites. So that is limits us into the type of items that we can provide. We're sitting around 15 to 20 products. We had more, of course, when we had that infusion of funding. We've had to scale back a little bit with the districts picking up full cost for products and shipping. And again, it has dovetailed nicely in Washington. We do have good support of local purchasing. So our sister agency, the Department of Ag, has some purchasing grant programs. Lots of times the recipients of those use that for smaller farms, which is great. But we have seen it come in as a little bit of a safeguard if this is somewhere they can't spend their money from a more direct purchase, or if they're struggling, they could utilize those fundings to pick up products through our program. And I think I'll save the rest for the other questions. Thanks, Cassandra.
Thanks, Leanne. Yeah, I feel like you do a great job at integrating existing platforms, which I know you'll talk about later, with this solicitation. And I just want to shout out to the images on the right. There's an awesome video for those who are interested in understanding what the program looks like and all of the different actors that touch this program, as well as other promotional resources, which I know other states are developing as well for the awarded vendors. All right. And then I think on the other end of the spectrum, in terms of a more hands-off approach, we are going to feature Utah with their Beef and Bison project. So, Danny, do you want to talk more about how it works?
Absolutely. Thanks, Cassandra. So for background on how our statewide solicitations began in Utah, I have to mention the federal LFS funding that Cassandra and Walter mentioned earlier. And I believe Leanne mentioned it as well. So in Utah, we focused on a single commodity, beef/bison, to kind of keep everything manageable, make implementation manageable for schools, make everything straightforward. And basically the Utah State Board of Education, so our state agency, issued a statewide solicitation on behalf of schools, which of course reduced a lot of that burden for schools. So the solicitation goes out for a certain amount of time. As Cassandra mentioned in the beginning, that's how they work. Our local producers who respond are evaluated with our own state contracts evaluation tool so that each producer receives a score, and the producers with a certain amount of points received a contract award. So USBE, while all this is happening, is also helping identify like regional producer options for each school within their own region and community, and then also helped with allocating funding amounts based on student enrollment. And once these allocations were set, each school was responsible for reaching out to producers, whoever that may be, right? The school nutrition director or a procurement contact or the business administrator. So they're in charge of reaching out to the producer, making purchases, and arranging for their own delivery logistics. So all they needed to do was keep their invoices and submit those to USBE to receive reimbursement. And then alongside all of these contracts and purchasing efforts, our Utah Farm to Fork initiative, which joins our state agency, Utah State Board of Education, and Utah Department of Ag together. We helped develop like really great promotional materials and resources to help schools, I would say, showcase their local food. Next slide. And then digging into a little bit more what makes it unique, we used a multiple award solicitation model and awarded contracts to 6 vendors, so 5 beef producers and 1 bison producer, with almost the 2 million through LFS in the first iteration. We then extended these contracts for an additional year. So similar to Washington, we use these contracts as a pilot program. So I like to use that quote unquote pilot program. However, when we learned that the next round of federal funding was rescinded, we paused expansion of the state contracts because we did survey our schools and received feedback that they were hesitant to continue purchasing with their own budgets without a substantial reimbursement source. So we needed to rebuild trust and momentum with schools and our producers that we originally worked with. But something to note here as well, Utah has a local food purchasing incentive program, but it's a relatively small reimbursement pool at the end of the day that we can distribute. So it's not giving us a great impact for schools to purchase local. But I will say the success of the LFS model and that pilot of the state contract extensions really helped lay the groundwork for our future statewide contracts. So we're now in the middle of expanding contracts to beef and tree fruit producers for school year 27 and or school year 28. So using the same kind of solicitation process. That's Utah.
Thank you, Danny. Yeah, I think Utah is an excellent example of you do a lot of that solicitation groundwork, but you don't always need the trucks. You don't need to work within distribution systems for this to happen. There is a lot of benefits to just doing that, procurement process for all of your schools. So thank you. Okay, now we're getting into a very unique model, and I'm going to let Simca talk about 2 different kinds of statewide solicitations that Massachusetts has. So Simca, do you want to talk about part 1 and part 2?
Sure. Thanks, everyone. Great to be with you. I'm Simca Horowitz with Massachusetts Farm to School. So unlike our prior speakers, I do not work for a state agency. I work for a nonprofit that works across our state. And we do have really strong relationships with our Department of Agriculture and Education, but are working as a nonprofit partner. So have really been hearing for years from schools that procurement was a significant barrier to increasing their local purchasing. And the Local Food for Schools program really served to kind of accelerate some work we had been starting to do around collaborative procurement. So the first iteration of this was in partnership with an entity called the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which is a sort of quasi-public state agency nonprofit. The important thing being that they have legal standing to do solicitations on behalf of municipalities. Prior to this, they'd been doing things like purchasing fire trucks and parking meters for municipalities, and decided to really start getting into the area of food because it aligned with a lot of their public health work as well. So what we worked on with MAPC was doing a request for proposals for Northeast produce. So really targeting products that would fit within the Local Food for Schools parameters. That was put out by MAPC in partnership with the Massachusetts Association of Regional Planning Agencies, thereby covering every city and town within the state. We put together an evaluation committee that reviewed the proposals that came back in, most of them from food hubs or distributors with a really specific focus on local food. Multiple awards were made in the first iteration. 10 awards were made. And then schools are able to take advantage of the solicitation without having to do any of their own like RFP process or anything like that. They do still execute their own contracts. MAPC doesn't hold the contract, but the solicitation has been taken care of for them. It was for a year with a 1-year renewal, and then we have done it again. So we're in essentially year 4 of this. And schools make their own purchases. It was not restricted to LFS funds, like they can use any of their own funds to purchase through this solicitation. Next slide. I probably already spoke about some of this, but it did award multiple vendors, and I will say, interesting that a lot of them have overlapping service areas. We're not a huge state, so schools are able to purchase from whichever ones they like, including some of them may have had contracts with more than one vendor. The awards are based on sort of reasonable price, looking at kind of average pricing from prior years from those vendors and making sure it was kind of in line with that established pricing, because we knew that comparing it to terminal market pricing or something may not be really fair for local vendors. Yeah, next slide. So now I'll talk about sort of like the next iteration of collaborative procurement, really kind of an outgrowth of that process. And this one is being done in partnership with our Operational Services Division. So this is the state agency that's responsible for issuing like bids and contracts on behalf of municipalities, executive agencies, et cetera. And there was really an awareness amongst a lot of school nutrition directors that those state contracts weren't really targeting the kinds of products they wanted to use in their school meal programs. So they went to Operational Services Division or OSD to say, can we do a school nutrition products bid? And that's what's come out of this. So similarly, there was a development of an RFP, and the RFP has 3 different categories. So in effect, kind of functions like 3 different RFPs, but the overarching framework is the same. The first was for conventional produce, then grocery items, and we're now looking like at a specific local foods category, which will be released in August. And it's not just produce, but dairy, meat, seafood, value-added products. So OSD puts out the RFP. They again made multiple vendor awards, and vendors are listing pricing, like kind of their max pricing that they'll be offering to schools, and they can't exceed that over the contract. The bid does reopen every 6 months, which allows new businesses to respond. Schools purchase directly from whichever awarded vendor they choose. They are encouraged to like solicit quotes from multiple in an informal way, get pricing so they can compare amongst the awarded vendors which one might have the best pricing for them. And OSD is holding the contract, and as part of that, managing the contract, vendors are submitting quarterly reports of all of their sales under the contract. And we do have a state law requiring supplier diversity commitments of at least 1% of the value of the contract for all vendors. Next slide. So this is for schools, but because it's really open to anybody who is eligible to purchase off of state contracts. So hospitals, we've seen correctional facilities, like all different types of institutions using it. It's also for a long time, a 3-year contract with 3 extensions, and really strict traceability language in this local foods category that's forthcoming. And then the opportunity to be listing other values in the vendor response, things like organic certification or fair trade certification, that sort of thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Simca, for walking us through both of what's going on in Massachusetts, both of those solicitations. I really love that the Northeast produce is specific to food hubs and aggregators. I think that that is unique among Massachusetts, something that I've told a lot of other states about. Now I want to move it on to Kanika to talk about an in-progress solicitation that Maryland is working on. Kanika, please share.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Kanika Campbell. I'm with the Maryland State Department of Education. I am here to talk about what we're calling our local food exchange, or LFE for short. And basically, it's an electronic facilitation and logistics solution. It's for school districts to request and order agricultural products from local growers, processors, and aggregators. And the system really is designed to hopefully eliminate some of the common barriers of local food procurement for school meals. How it'll work, and as Cassandra said, this is still under development. It is currently really, truly under development, and we're hoping to have something by next summer that we can open up and share. But how it will work is that MSDE, we are issuing a solicitation for farmers, processors, distributors, and aggregators to enter into the local food exchange platform. Whoever responds to the solicitation will make the selection based on their prices, their geographic reach, food safety, other factors. And once we're not going to be too picky because we really do want everyone in the system, as many as we can. Approved vendors, they'll be able to enter their real-time availability into the platform. And then schools on the other end will be able to order the products directly through LFE and also provide those invoices. And then the vendors are responsible for delivering and having the processing of a payment. And we also are really hoping that aggregation starts happening within the system as well to meet the school quantity requirements. Next slide. So just a few things about LFE, and we'll also talk about this a little later, but it was funded by the USDA from a formula grant, state formula grant that we received in 2022. So as is an online ordering platform, we're really looking at it as a one-stop shop we call our SFAs, LEAs in Maryland. So it's a one-stop shop for LEAs and the producers to meet in the middle somewhere, right there, and they can order, deliver, invoice, speak to each other within that platform. It'll also be able to order from different producers. So if you want 50 pounds, if Farmer Mary has 50 pounds of broccoli and Farmer Tom has 50 pounds of broccoli, you're able to order both to cover a school meal. And the benefit for producers as being part of the system is that they're able to supply to the LEAs without responding to multiple county solicitations. They'll respond to one state solicitation. Then they'll be able to work with any district that is a part of the LFE system. Thanks.
Thank you. I am definitely interested in seeing this platform once it's developed. So best of luck and really excited to share it out once it's ready. And then we don't have a representative from Colorado on just because 5 panelists felt like too many already, but I would be remiss if I didn't shout out Nourish Colorado and sort of a consortium, a purchasing collective of schools and senior care centers and rural grocery stores in Colorado that have established the Southeast Colorado Regional Bid, which essentially is a region within Colorado. There's a purchasing collective. It's supported by the Department of Education and offers its own solicitation to make awards, and then individual members make purchases. So that is on pause as of last year, but it is something we're watching and excited about for, an individual collective in Colorado. Okay. Thank you all so much for sharing about your programs. I think we are going to move it on to our panel discussion. So let me stop sharing here and let me highlight if I can find him. Walter, our first question is for you. And as I noted, North Carolina has the oldest program. in the nation that we found. Can you share a little bit more about how it's grown over time and what contributed to this success?
Well, like I said earlier, we started with one product, which is a spring favorite, is fresh strawberries. And it just really caught on. So one or two products at a time. It continued to grow over the years. We find some products that schools won't, and we would try them, put them on in our catalog. If it worked, we would continue. If not, because we were limited, couldn't carry everything. So over the years, it's expanded. Like I said, it's over 25 different items. We actually have locally grown ground beef now. We do fresh blueberries and frozen blueberries. I mentioned sweet potatoes earlier. We have some fresh cut French fries and diced sweet potatoes, but they are chef sensitive. So we also this year have a frozen French fry as well, so that it's more versatile to the schools, because you put it in the freezer and use it when you need it. But we have a collection of 22 different farmers or suppliers that just came together, and when the schools wanted a product, they work really hard to get it to them, and hope we can keep on growing.
Excellent. And what do you think contributed to that growth?
North Carolina, a lot of North Carolina is a rural state, and a lot of people are used to having their own gardens and growing fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, mainly. Some fruits, we do have a lot of apples and stuff like that, but I think it's just getting back to the basics, because a lot of people were raised in homes that had their own local garden where they grew their own products. So it kind of just came over into the schools, which kind of fits in with everything you hear in this day about buy local and cook and scratch cooking. So we're already part of the way there.
Absolutely. Thank you. And my next question is also for you, Walter, and it's about the USDA distribution system, like tying into USDA food. So can you talk more about how that intersection works?
Yes, we do administer the National School Lunch Program. We do the TFAP program. We do CSFP program, and we have a soup kitchen program. So we're covering the entire state. We have a fleet of 30 trucks. Soon we'll have 58 trailers. So we can sometimes, our load is designated to go to a school or schools only. We can mix and match and go to a food bank and a school as well. And these trailers are dual temps. So if we have produce for a school, but it's not a school or a group of schools, because some trucks can make 5 and 6 stops a day. These are tractor trailers. And we can put produce on the back, but if it's room for 6 or 8 pallets in the nose, and the closest thing to that route they're going on is a food bank, we can put frozen in the nose and set it on 0. We put up the skinny bun, and we set the back on 36 and keep the fresh produce at the temperature it needs to be as well. So we've got to be pretty versatile, so we can utilize every trip, every time a truck goes out of here, because diesel fuel is expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I think we'll turn it over. I want to ask the same question to Leanne. You also leverage USDA foods distribution systems. Can you talk about that process and maybe how it's a little different than North Carolina's? How are you doing that?
Yeah, sure. So if anybody's familiar with the USDA Foods program, and how that works, we do not roll down web SCM to our recipient agencies. We manage that at the state level. So I mention that because I think it makes it a little bit easier for us to integrate in. I also think I mentioned how we had already been processing USDA foods into end products, so it was really easy to mirror that. So our recipient agency, sponsors, school districts, whatever you want to call them, we're used to this concept of I show interest in a product. almost a year and a half ahead of time. I'm going to tell you if I want to purchase this. I'm going to tell you how many cases I intend to purchase, and then we can run our solicitation off that. So I'll talk more about that, about how we get there. Um, but my point being is that we just really mirrored that. So we have an IT platform where they can go in, they put those pre-orders, and then when we are actually during the school year, that's the system that they're going to go order their foods. And then we roll all of that up together, and then that goes in a flat file to our contractor, who then works through the process of making those deliveries.
Great. Thank you. Now moving away from USDA distribution systems, Simca, during our prep call, you mentioned that there was a lot of infrastructure, even though it wasn't USDA foods distribution infrastructure, there was other kinds of infrastructure in Massachusetts that helped create and inform your program. Can you talk about what systems made it possible?
Yeah, so I would say we're really different in that like the state does not own trucks or any of that kind of like hard infrastructure to be able to do the kind of distribution that we're hearing about from some other states. So it was really thinking about what systems could be utilized to create greater collaboration. So I mean, some of that is like that there already were some buying groups, so schools were kind of accustomed to doing some purchasing together, but often in a really informal way and without any sort of staffing or that sort of thing. So having an entity that could take that on behalf of the buying group is really where particularly the solicitation done by MAPC kind of grew out of. One of those buying groups approached MAPC for some support around this. And I think also the structure of having like a regional planning agency that has the standing to do solicitations was really helpful. The fact that they then have a state agency, like a state association, that made it not just that one planning agency in Metro Boston, but like covering every single city and town in the state. Those were all sort of factors that helped with making this widely available and usable to school districts across the state. I should say we have over 400 separate school districts in Massachusetts, even though we're not that big. So part of the procurement barrier we're also trying to address is on the supplier or vendor side, like them not having to respond to so many individual, solicitations that might all be the same.
Yeah, thanks, Simca.
Yeah.
Kanika, I want to ask you the same question, even though you're in the middle of your program and planning it. What kinds of infrastructure were in place, or did you have to put in place to have your solicitation?
Yeah, sure. So there was several different steps. So our original funding was through our USDA formula grant. And so that kind of started getting the ball moving with this large enough project because we did have the funding for it to start off. Also, with a separate USDA grant, our 2022 Farm to School grant, we conducted a farm to school sustainability project in Maryland, and that really framed the direction of this project because it talked to our stakeholders, it talked to our schools, it talked to our farmers, and we found out what were the barriers to providing local to school meals. And because of that research and the results that we had, that framed the need for this system. But outside of that, I would also say our partnerships. We worked with our Department of General Services, which in Maryland is the state office that is the primary procurement unit for the state, and they usually do the solicitations. So they are working with us to develop the solicitation for the agricultural producers and as well as the LFE system itself, which is in development. So they've been helping us with those solicitations. We also partner with our Department of Ag. They are offering support and they collaborate with us. And, we're educators, they're working with the farmers. So they kind of help us on that agricultural side. They have access to farmers and provide some technical assistance along the way. We also work with A lot of our farming partners in the state, the Maryland Farm Bureau, a University of Maryland extension program that we have, and some of our other agricultural groups in the state, and they have that connection to farmers, and we're working with them so that they can connect with the farmers and bring that information back to us. And another piece is that we had a delegate on our side that helped us with some legislation. So the subsequent legislation really established the local food purchasing program. It supports the implementation of this system itself, but it also did some other things like prioritizing our certified local farm and fisheries. It allows us to mark our delivery sites within 250 miles, which, USDA had it at 400 and we wanted it a little closer. And it also supports the 20% local goal. So we had just a lot of pieces put together, and it's all working together so far.
Excellent. Thank you. I was hoping you had mentioned that legislation, and thanks for the shout out to the research done. I know that was really instrumental. Thank you, Kanika. All right, Danny, same question to you, and then we'll move on to more implementation questions. What kinds of infrastructure and systems were in place, or did you have to put in place to really make your solicitation happen?
Yeah, well, we've had one in place for I think it's about 5 years now, but this is our enhanced local reimbursement program, which is our state's local food purchasing incentive. So schools can purchase Utah grown, Utah raised foods and fill out a school food survey at the end of the year, so that they can receive a small reimbursement back. So we as a state, we total up what schools have spent on local food and compare that to their total food spending within all school nutrition programs. So the higher the percentage, the higher the reimbursement for them. But we only have a total of 260,000 appropriated each year for that, and that's total for all schools that we divvy out to. In a small way, it does help encourage local purchasing, but it doesn't cover the full cost of local food purchases. So we're always looking for sustained funding in that sense, for all of these efforts. But another thing that we're working on, or a system in place that we're trying to put into place, is we're working with distributors to target and identify their local food products in their catalogs for schools. And that can help specifically with our tree fruit solicitation that we're going to have for state contracts. And I'll also say that we now have an established system for statewide solicitations for local food, and like an established evaluation tool, which we didn't have before LFS. So even if our internal process is slow or delayed for these kinds of things, we at least have those in place.
That's great. Yeah, moving forward, I think I heard this from Simca last year, and we talked about this, that it gets easier when this thing is in place. It's easier to move forward year after year. And for everyone else on the call, it's easier for you all because you have these solicitations that will be sent out, or at least some of the resources that will be sent out in post, that you can learn to how you can design your own program and pick and choose what you like. Thanks, Danny. My next question is also for you, and it's really diving deeper into like how you came up with specifications or different scopes of work when you were drafting that solicitation.
Great question. So as I mentioned before, our state has that established internal process. I also work directly with a state contract specialist at our office. But as far as specs and scopes, a lot of it is just speaking with schools. Do we have buy-in? And then producers, are producers willing to create this new market channel for schools? And then we build out those requirements and product details that way. So I'm asking questions like, what are the school meal program requirements, the capacity of kitchen equipment, right? The things schools need to credit food products easily. And for our producers, can they offer ground beef, patties, chubs, in what sizes, what kind of packs? Can they deliver? That's super important for our schools. They will not purchase from these contracts if a lot of our producers won't deliver. So that's super important. And asking questions like what tree fruit products can be produced to scale for schools? Can they be sold fresh, frozen, or dried? And then, of course, our state agency has standard language for location restrictions, right? Any of the geographic preference, food safety, Buy American provision, and price adjustments. Since our contracts are only 1 year, we're pushing for a 5-year contract for these, but they're 1 year. So every year we can create adjustments if we need to, which is really nice.
That's great. Yeah, sounds like for folks on the call, maybe steeped in farm to school, you can lean on other folks from departments, from purchasing offices for a lot of that language, lean on lots of partnerships to help make that happen. And Simca, I want to, since you sort of brought this up, you also had a longer process of, reaching out to folks in your community for solicitations. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we've had kind of two different processes in terms of developing the solicitation. The first one with MAPC, my organization really sort of drove that as a kind of supply chain coordinators that have been involved in farm to school for over 20 years. Like we had been hearing a lot of what the challenges were and what schools were looking for. And so and had conversations with a number of the food hubs and local suppliers we anticipated would want to respond to ensure that like the way that we were structuring the RFP was going to be something they could actually respond to. Also, just really informed by conversation with school nutrition staff, and then working with MAPC, who has a lot of expertise in kind of the like regulatory compliance, both like state and federal procurement regulations, but did not have much experience in buying food. Like they were really leaning on us as the content experts, and really wanting to make sure that the evaluation criteria were getting at what we wanted this bid to do. So particularly as it was coming on the heels of LFS, that there was some there was really strong language around traceability of the product back to the farm of origin, but also stuff around historically underserved producers, because that was a focus of LFS as well. The process with Operational Services Division has been a little bit different because they do have more kind of formal structures for developing RFPs. So they put together what they call a strategic sourcing team, which is made up of the one for this local foods bid is made up of 6 or so school nutrition directors. I sit on it as well. Also somebody who works in food policy for the city of Boston, who's a former food service director. And then we've invited in content area experts. So for example, when we were developing the parameters for local seafood, we invited in the person who runs our local seafood marketing program within our Division of Marine Fisheries. So she could really review like, how are you setting up the price list for seafood? Does this make sense for the species available here? What people are catching, what they're processing, like all of that kind of stuff to make sure that it's structured in a way that's actually something people in the industry can respond to.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Wow. What a great answer to that question. I'm glad so much engagement is happening. Leanne, did you want to share anything about your specifications in Washington?
Very similar to what other folks have talked to. I think about it as like it's the intersection between wants and needs and what's available. So wants and needs, we were surveying our school districts in what kind of products are you looking for from local sources? What would be helpful? Pack size? Do you need it chopped? What do you need? And then really looking at the marketplace and trying to figure out what's out there. I think this is where our partnership, so in Washington, the child nutrition programs or the core ones are operated out of our State Department of Education, but we have a close working relationship with the Washington State Department of Ag. So we could really leverage that partnership and their knowledge about what was out in the marketplace, who was out in the marketplace, so we could really do that market research to figure out where, again, that intersection was, wants and needs to what's available.
Great. And then did you want to share any specific challenges that you had with your solicitation process?
Yeah, I think we've learned so much along the way, and every time you do a new solicitation, you have an opportunity to make it even better. But what I tend to think about is we leveraged an existing system that was used to dealing with USDA direct items and then kind of like large processors. And so, again, if I'd go back in time, it would be to really think through, we're probably targeting kind of a mid-size vendor who maybe isn't used to this kind of large system. So we've ended up, you need to provide technical assistance and support to really manage that. So some of the things to think about is like we were asking them to deliver to these major warehouses. Do you, is your small box truck isn't the same as a semi backing up to a loading dock. So again, it's just managing expectations as part of that RFP is being as clear as possible about what the expectations are. Some of the other challenges is those big warehouses are used to products coming in, being clearly labeled the cases so they can manage that. If you're a smaller producer, that might not have been important to you. You've never really kind of thought about that. You respond to the pack size and the case size, but we don't think about how is it marked. And then because that's going to impact its movement through those warehouses and can the orders be picked and can they be picked correctly? The other thing is delivery schedules, right? So we've got set USDA delivery schedules that don't have a lot of flexibility. Product needs to come in the warehouse, it's going back out to schools, all of that is managed. We often can't slip a week, a day. It depends on when it hits that schedule. But again, if you're a smaller vendor, your other contracts, there may have been more wiggle room. And to, again, just making sure you've kind of thought through some of those operational issues and make sure you're communicating that and you're providing support and technical assistance to your vendors, your potential vendors, so everybody can be successful.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Great words of advice. Lots of technical assistance is needed during this process, especially for newer vendors to this system. I think on the idea of learning curves and other processes, I want to invite Kanika to talk more about this web platform that you're developing. Can you share about how that's going?
Sure. So I think I spoke a little bit about this in the introduction, but this really came about based on our sustainability report and hearing the challenges from both the school end and the farmer's end. And so one of the challenges that schools face when attempting to source local for their school meals was identify producers who had the available products and also that had the large enough quantity that could fulfill a full school meal, right? You can't just go to anyone. But also farmers were reluctant to move through all of the challenges of the solicitation process. And so this system really kind of brings both of those challenges to the head, right? The schools are able to find producers that have what they need, that has the quantity that they need for a full school meal system. And also the producers are able to do one solicitation. We know solicitations are rough, but they're able to complete one and be able to work with a multitude of school districts once it's completed, they're approved, and it's in the system. So this just means that the schools have access to a larger quantity, the producers have access to more buyers. They are also able to aggregate to fulfill orders. We're the goal and the hope. And I know it's different because ours is still in process. And so we don't have a final product, but we really have the hopes that this system will really bring together the needs of the schools, the needs of the producers into a marketplace that will increase local for the school meals and also increase purchasing from all of our state producers in Maryland are considered small. So increase the buying power of the smaller producers. It is challenging because it is a model that has not been done before. And so we don't really have anything to piggyback off of. And so we are designing from the ground up. We are currently, we have people in place designing this. So it is a very exciting time at MSDE. And so we are at the point of what exactly needs to be here. What are the buttons that need to happen? And it's a very exciting time, but it's a very challenging time because we are not technology people. We are just people that are really excited to bring local onto school meals. And we hope that that is the solution that we have soon, in about a year.
Thank you. And we have 5 minutes left on this panel, so I'm gonna just ask everybody. I agree, you're doing great. Everybody, what their final advice for folks out there who are interested in developing a statewide solicitation. What's your final advice for them? We'll start with you, Kanika.
Sure, no problem. So I will keep it quick. Right now, we understand the parameters of what your agencies can do because that was our first step. We thought we could do things and people told us to reel it back in. So understand what you are allowed to do. Understand what the policy and the landscape looks like at your state level. Make sure that you have the funding in place before you make any of these decisions. And also just get some buy-in and partnerships among those key stakeholders because they will just be imperative in moving forward.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Simca, maybe as the only nonprofit panelist here, what is your advice for nonprofits who are listening on how to get involved?
Yeah, I think I would say, and I do want to say our state agencies are really incredible partners in this work. So they, in many ways, have sort of entrusted our organization and are contracting with us to do a lot of this work due to some of their own staff capacity challenges, and that's been really transformative. But I think figuring out like who has the authority to be working on this kind of contracting, it might not only be like the Department of Education. In our case, this regional planning agency has been an incredible partner. Figuring out like who those partners could be, and like how you can, if you are a nonprofit partner that really has experience either like on the school side or the farm side, what opportunities there are to sort of lend your perspective and expertise to the solicitation development process and being that content area expert for folks who may have legal authority to be doing this sort of work, but it's just not their wheelhouse and like might really appreciate having some of the content area support.
Thank you, Simca. Danny, what is your last advice for folks interested in a solicitation?
I always go back to starting with the end user in mind, and what I mean by that is to just make an effort to engage with school nutrition directors, and understand what products they want, how they prefer to order, their desired pack sizes, their budget, their processing specifications, right? Their delivery needs. So a contract that works for producers but not for schools and students will just not be used.
Great. Thank you. Leanne, last advice?
I'm actually going to piggyback off of what Danny said because I absolutely agree. And then I think the other part of that is then to manage the expectations to districts, like regarding the commitment to purchase. So you said you were interested, you said you wanted this, like we did all the work to make this whole system work and make it viable for vendors who want to come back again. You've got to purchase what you said you were going to purchase, right? I mean, it's one of the things that, what makes you nervous about this whole system is that we went out to our egg community and said, we want this and we want this much. It would be horrible if then we couldn't kind of deliver on that and actually make it true, right? They went through all the effort. They either grew the product or, produced it. I want us to meet that commitment. So I think about that.
Absolutely. You're getting lots of nods, lots of agreement in the chat. Thank you for sharing that, Leanne. And Walter, you had the first word. Now I'm giving you the last word before we open it up to Q&A. What's your advice?
Just use your resources. We have a farm to school advisory board made up of 8 nutrition directors across our state, because believe it or not, the mountains, what the people in the mountains like is different from the Piedmont, which is different from the coastal plains. So we have 8 nutrition directors that make up this board so we can cover the needs of all the state. Secondly, we have a marketing division that has a relationship with everybody involved in agriculture, not just the farmers we deal with. So the resources they have at their fingertips is great. And our Department of Public Instruction, they do a lot of things to support buying local, using local products. And then lastly is promotional items. We have a calendar contest. We have a calendar every year made up of artwork from schools, so we involve the schools. We have activity and storybooks for almost all the products that we have. We have posters. So we just promote it as much as we can because every time it's something out there that people can see, it brings their attention back to it. So we just try to promote it as much as we can.
Absolutely. Thank you, Walter. And now we have 15 minutes for Q&A. We decided this was so rich of content and so many states that we were going to make it 75 minutes, not 60, which I think was a great decision. So for those who have to hop to something else, feel free to. This will be in the recording. But if you want to be here to get your question responded to, we'll also try our best to respond to them after the fact, but no guarantees. I'm going to pass it over. Well, first of all, I'm going to thank the panelists. That was amazing. Thank you so much for what you do, your innovation, and for sharing it here today. I've been trying to organize this panel for about a year, so it finally happened. Because I just knew everyone would be very excited on what you wanted to share. And now I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Cheryl, who has been reading all of your questions over the last hour. Cheryl, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Cassandra. And again, thanks to all of our panelists. I was an exciting attendee as well as a co-facilitator here. So we have several questions. So I'm going to pose this to all of our speakers about how statewide solicitations can accurately gather volume estimates from so many different participating SFAs. And there's a few sub-questions in that too. I would say specific to the solicitation, the sub-question is, do purchases reflect projections? So any one of our panelists that wants to go first, because I think we can have each answer this if there's a different take on it, but feel free to take yourself off mute.
If it's okay, I'll go first. We don't forecast. We don't buy in advance. Once we have the bid solicitation and we provide it to the schools, now we guesstimate what we think they will want based on past history, but the end solicitation is for the exact amount ordered by the schools. So everything that we pick up has a home when we pick it up. There is no leftovers, no extra, no nothing. Everything we pick up has a home.
I can take it next. So a little bit of a different approach. So again, we match our food distribution system. So each January, folks are going to give us what we call a pre-order. So it's your commitment for the next school year. And then that's how we're going to build our solicitation and how much product we're going to anticipate to bring in. And then the next school year, they're going to start placing their orders. And so we're going to watch what we projected that we were going to purchase, like continuing to purchase those truckloads. But as I mentioned, there's inherent risk in that. And it feels even more important now when the schools are fully funding that versus when we had that backing of the local foods for schools. That felt a little bit more comfortable because we had that to fall back on. Now we've got to rely on the schools purchasing what they said they were going to purchase. But again, we've tried to put things into place as far as managing those commitments and expectations and just how we work with schools, how we frame that up, how we say it's your commitment to purchase, to manage that. But that's how we handle it in Washington.
I'd say in Massachusetts, the short answer is that we don't. So these solicitations are not, there's no buying of food that the state is doing. For the first MAPC bid, because it was somewhat related to LFS, we said like Massachusetts has been awarded $3.5 million. We anticipate this will be a useful tool for schools to spend that money. But otherwise, like it is available to all school districts in the state, and there is no commitment that a school is making to like opt into it. It is available to them if they want to use it. And so there's no commitment made to the vendor of a particular amount of sales that they should expect. So we, in large part, do not engage in sort of volume estimates or commitments.
And on the Utah side, very similar to what Simca mentioned in Massachusetts, and also what Walter was saying. The end solicitation and contract is available to the schools, and it's up to the schools to create that relationship with the producers and figure out what they want. We'll have the specs in place, but it's up for the schools to use the contracts.
I'll just say
Great.
same.
Thank you for sorry, go ahead, Kanika.
No. I was saying same. We're not doing any purchasing. The schools would be. We're just facilitating.
So just piggybacking off that a little bit, because there were some questions about this also in Canva, how, and actually in chat right now too, how does pricing play into it if volumes are not, and I understand volumes aren't guaranteed, they often aren't in solicitations, but are you finding that pricing is working for your producers given the fact that there's variance in how much they're going to actually be selling? Or there's some risk, I would say, associated in how much they're going to be selling? Anyone want to field that?
Well, I'll speak to it. When we do our solicitation, it's well in advance, so that when we get the school's orders, they already know what price they're going to be paying for what they order. So there's no gray area there with us.
Okay. Thanks, Walter.
I don't know if this is really answering your question, but for both of the solicitations I've been involved with, essentially the vendors are setting like a not to exceed price. And so they're being evaluated on the reasonableness of that. And I think one of the things that, has been really interesting in working with procurement agents who maybe are less accustomed to the local food space is how there's not the same kind of volatility in the market that you would see with conventional produce. So they were really surprised that like the food hubs were totally fine with saying this is going to be our pricing for like the next 6 months, and like we can commit to that no problem, because they're not sourcing lettuce from like this state and then this state and then this, like they have their lettuce supplier and they're working with 2 farms, and those farms are fine to stick to the same lettuce price all season. And like I think it's worked well because like that stability in pricing can exist in a local food market in a way that it's less likely to, and in particularly speaking to produce, in a conventional produce market.
Thank you, Simco. Okay, great. So moving on from that, and there was a lot of activity again specific to those. Moving into distribution, so kind of similarly along the same thread of statewide bid, not certain of who's going to be purchasing off the contracts, what distribution looks like to those particular entities. How is delivery factored in as a function of pricing in these solicitations? So if that's specific to the solicitation you're putting out, and if it does factor in distribution, can you talk a little bit about how that's done?
In Washington, it's probably pretty straightforward. So in the solicitation, we name the 4 warehouses that would be the delivery site, and then the districts are paying for the shipping from those warehouses to their location. And again, that's kind of baked into our existing system. It's per case charges.
Thanks, Leanne.
For Utah, very similar to what Leanne was saying. We put in the specs or the requirements for producers that they'll need to be able to deliver to the school food authorities. And then that is all part of the price point and the way that we develop prices for a contract.
And Danny, do you have minimums in that too, as well?
Yeah, we have minimums.
Sorry, Walter.
In North Carolina, we typically pick up on Fridays, deliver on Mondays, and there is no fee associated with it.
Yep. You solve for distribution, Walter.
And for us, the vendors, the price that they're quoting is inclusive of delivery, but they're allowed to state what their minimum delivery requirement is. So they may have like 150 per drop or whatever it might be, but the stated price, they can't like add on delivery fees on top of it.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Walter, speaking of distribution, there's a question in here about, because I think it is a bit unique that the State Department of Ag is distributing food and has this fleet of trucks. And there was a question in chat about how this is funded essentially. And is that just a part of your program budget, something that you have, I mean, obviously you've prioritized it over time, but given the uniqueness of that, can you just speak a little bit about it?
Well, yeah, it's basically all a part of our budget. I mean, we do administer federal programs, but basically we're funded by the state as well. And our budgets that we have simply allow us to provide this service at no fee. And again, like I said earlier, we may be going to these stops or going to this area with other food already. So it's not like it's solely just to deliver 3 pallets of apples. I mean, we can put other food with it too. So is it a little bit additional expense to do it on our part? Yes, it is. But a lot of times we can work it in with a trip that already warrants going. So, but no, that's just a service we provide, and the state of North Carolina supports it.
Right. Well, we are almost to 3:15. I did want to ask a question to Kanika about the platform, and there's a few questions in chat specific to who's going to be able to use the platform, whether or not it's co-ops, whether commodities will be able to be used on it, and also what it will qualify for in terms of a legal solicitation. So is it informal? Will it qualify as a formal? So if you can speak to that a little bit, I know it's in development.
It's okay. So for right now, our first iteration of this will be with our school systems. We are including that as our public and non-public school systems. Further down the line, we are looking to other state agencies, Department of Justice, not Department of Justice, DJS, state hospitals and things like that. But our first iteration is the school systems. You asked me another question, but
I did. So it was about the procurements. Like what would it count as? Like if they're buying off that, is it like an informal? I mean, it probably is dependent on size as well, but
it's a formal procurement. The producers are responding to a formal procurement solicitation to be included within the system. So they are able, once in the system, they just responded to that once, and the schools are able to opt in within that solicitation. So it's a formal solicitation. Was that
fantastic.
it? I felt like there was a third one, but okay.
Well, I was also talking about like co-ops will be able to use the exchange and set up bids with vendors and the types of products that will be able to show up on the exchange.
Yeah, so it's a little later for others outside of the school systems. Those are our first ones. And for our initial, we have fruits, vegetables, dairy, protein, seafood, Maryland blue catfish, if anyone's familiar. And some value added products will be included, like Maryland blueberry muffins or things like that. So, yep.
Super exciting to see that, to see it evolve over time. So we are almost at 3:15. I want to give a shout out to Lizzie on the back end, who's been responding to Canva as questions are being answered in real time. And as a facilitation team, we will do our best to get the rest of these fantastic questions answered, but I think we are out of time. So Cassandra, I'm going to pass this back to you to bring it home.
Thank you, Cheryl. Great facilitation of the Q&A. I learned so much more in that 15 minutes than I thought I ever could. And so thank you for that. And thank you to our panelists for coming. And they'll see the community of practice members tomorrow in our next week in our closed group meeting, where we'll sit down and ask more questions with them. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for being here. My email is cassandra@farmtoschool.org if you have follow-ups to me, and I can get you in touch with any of these folks. But Simca, Leanne, Kanika, Danny, Walter, thank you so much for your work. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
All right.